Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Crisis Within a Crisis, Hurricane Planning During a Pandemic. We have a good lineup for you, very important topic today to prepare your businesses, to prepare Florida as we enter the storm season during this really interesting year. So we have speakers today from, we have Frank Amandro, the Assistant Director of Public Safety from St. Lucie County and the Emergency Operations Center, Kate Kottner, the Senior External Affairs Advisor with FPL, Chris Soska, the Chief Operating Officer with Cleveland Clinic Martin Health, is here with us, as well as Kathy Post, the President of Post Insurance. So welcome, everybody. We really appreciate you being here, appreciate you building this webinar. I want to introduce the Virtual Business Recovery Center is who is putting on this webinar today. So we are a joint project with the St. Lucie County Economic Development Council, the Florida Small Business Development Center, Indian River State College, and the Corporate and Community Training Institute. We are here to provide local companies with resources to thrive in a new economy with new ways of doing business. We provide proactive business recovery, for local and regional businesses, webinars with subject matter experts on various topics as you are joining today, business assistance counselors through the SBDC, through WeVenture, SCORE, and others. We have substantial business assistance at the ready for you. And then we have several counselors that are monitoring this webinar today. Very much encourage you to use the chat room. This is intended to be a dialogue. So we'll go through our presentations, and then we are leaving substantial room at the end for discussion, for your questions of the presenters. Very much like to thank 8th Avenue Studios. This is the wonderful 8th Avenue Studios. Brian Smith hosts us here for our VBRC special webinars such as this. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted tomorrow over the weekend at youredc.com/VBRC. So with that, I want to introduce Frank is our first presenter from the Emergency Operations Center.
Bill, thank you so much. And thank you so much. And it's certainly an honor to participate in the webinar today. A great topic, a very important topic for citizens. You know, many people ask, what do we do in public safety when a hurricane isn't in the Atlantic bearing down on St. Lucie County? The COVID-19 pandemic is a perfect example of what we do besides responding to hurricanes. We are constantly planning, preparing, and training all year long for all man-made and natural disasters. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a definite impact on our planning and preparations for this hurricane season. The prediction for the 2020 hurricane season is an above average season with 13 to 19 named tropical storms. Of those, 6 to 10 will be hurricanes. Of those, 3 to 6 are predicted to be a major hurricane, a category 3, 4, or 5. You know, the biggest impact that we've seen is the way that we're going to manage the storm this year. When we typically activate our Emergency Operations Center, whenever a storm is predicted to impact St. Lucie County, we bring in our emergency support functions, our ESFs, which are representatives from all the services we as citizens have come to rely on, such as our utilities partners, transportation, medical services, law enforcement, fire department, just to name a few. We typically have anywhere from 100 to 120 ESF partners working together inside our EOC whenever a storm hits. However, this year, because of COVID-19, in order to keep these essential personnel safe, we, like everyone else, will be deploying social distancing. This means we will only have 40 to 50 essential personnel stationed inside our EOC this year. That doesn't mean that you're going to see a decrease of services. We will have all our typical partners joining us virtually in our virtual EOC. We have been practicing this since we've been practicing this strategy since March 18th, when we activated the EOC in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. One of our biggest challenges this year, this hurricane season, is with our special needs shelters and our general population shelters. We've developed plans to maintain social distancing, mandatory use of face coverings, and obtaining personnel protective equipment, otherwise known as PPE equipment, for our staff, volunteers, and clients that will be using these shelters. Staffing the shelters with the appropriate number of medical personnel, such as nurses and technicians, have also been a challenge for us this year. But rest assured, we are working hard to have our shelters appropriately staffed. We have developed some strategies this season as well. The UC has been working with the St. Lucie School District, the Indian River State College, Florida Atlantic University, Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie, and the Department of Health to add space within our schools and universities to expand the capacity within our special needs shelter and our general population shelters, along with our pet-friendly shelters as well. These shelters will utilize temperature checks, face coverings such as masks and shields, gloves and barriers, and sanitizer to protect those citizens using our shelters. Our hurricane season messaging is also being tweaked to advise our citizens to, most importantly, know their zones. If you live in an evacuation zone or a flood-prone zone, possibly develop a plan to stay with friends or family or someone in your congregation. If you live in a home and or dwelling that is not in a flood-prone zone, plan on having a safe room that can be used to isolate a sick family member should someone become sick before or after the passing storm, in lieu of going to a special needs shelter or a general population shelter. Do you know if your home is built to the current building code? Is it practical to stay in your home during a hurricane or not? Or do you really need to utilize our shelters? Make a kit. Maintain a 7-day supply of emergency supplies such as medications, food, water, medications, and important documents such as your insurance paperwork, which you'll hear more about later. Make a plan. Have a communication plan, such as using walkie-talkies, weather radio, or have a family or a friend that lives away from the state that can serve as a point of contact to communicate with family in Florida. Also, most importantly, register with Alert St. Lucie to receive notifications on emergency alerts and warnings. We will also deploy our public information line again this year, a great source of information as it's unfolding. That number is 772-462-HELP or 772-462-4357. Finally, please know that a shelter, whether it's the special needs shelter or a general population shelter, it's certainly not a hotel. It's a last resort. You know, if you truly need a special needs shelter or a general population shelter, then please have a plan and implement that plan, such as a go kit, you know, face coverings, hand sanitizer, as well as important documentation in your medication, food, a food supply, you know, especially if you're a diabetic or you have a special diet, you know, because our shelters only provide the adequate food and water, not specialized food. Know where your local shelters are as well. Plan ahead. Don't wait till the last minute. Don't wait until there's a storm bearing down on St. Lucie County. Wash your hands frequently. Maintain distance between you and others. Typically, our special or our general population shelters, you know, they have a square footage per person, about 60 square feet per person. With social distancing, that has increased to 110 square feet. Wear a cloth face covering when in public. Clean and sanitize as often as you can. Cover your cough and sneezes. Monitor your health, and that's most important. Continue to monitor your health. If you're evacuating, plan on evacuating, you know, 10 miles away or a couple miles away instead of 100 miles away. Stay close. Staying close helps you stay close to family members and familiar surroundings, such as shelters, roads, and local assistance. Leaving far from your home means being vulnerable to running out of gas, being stranded, not having shelter available in the community that you've evacuated to, and not knowing where to seek resources as well. All this information can certainly be found on St. Lucie County website, recoverstlucie.org or stlucieco.gov.
Excellent. Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much. And one of our other important partners, one of our great corporate citizens, FPL, is here with us. So Kate Cotner from FPL has some more important information for you, whether you're at home or considering a shelter. Kate, welcome. You're muted, Kate.
Sorry, let's try that again. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Kate Cotner, and I am the Senior External Affairs Advisor with Florida Power and Light. It's unfortunate we can't be together in person, but I'm happy to be here virtually to share with you just how Florida Power and Light is prepared for this year's hurricane season. So I have a slide presentation. If we could put that up, that would be fantastic. Please. And thank you. All right. So first, let's start with a little bit about Florida Power and Light. We provide affordable, reliable, clean energy to more than 5 million customer accounts in the state of Florida. So that's an estimated 10 million people. One fun and important fact is our typical 1,000 kilowatt residential customer bill is approximately 30% lower than the national average. So it's something that we pride ourselves on. We're becoming a leader in solar energy. And we're right here in St. Lucie County, and we're proud to serve the community. Next slide. Oh, back one, please. Thank you. So living in Florida comes with the fundamental responsibility of preparing for hurricanes. This is just a snippet of what we've experienced over the past several years. However, the past several months, I think we all can agree, have shown us that there's no such thing as being too prepared. It's more important than ever that our customers are prepared for this year's hurricane season, because we could be dealing with that potential of the double crisis, a hurricane and a pandemic. Next slide, please. So please know that Florida Power and Light has a plan for storm season, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're in the best position to restore the service safely and quickly after a storm. Let's talk a little bit about what Florida Power and Light has done to harden its system. In the past 10 years, we've spent $5 billion to make our system harder and more resilient. So in fact, this year marks 15 years since Hurricane Wilma tore through our state. And since then, we've really upped our hardening efforts. We've hardened nearly all of the main power lines serving our critical community facilities, such as police and fire stations, the hospitals, and our 911 centers. We also trim about 15,000 miles of power lines each year so that the vegetation doesn't become an issue for power outages. Next slide, please. Thank you. We're also leveraging technology like never before. We've installed over 5 million smart meters, and we have more than 120,000 intelligent devices along our energy grid. Using this technology, we can detect problems ahead of time, and we can also restore the service faster if outages do occur. We also deployed drones and autonomous robots after a storm so that we can quickly assess the damage and dispatch our crews to where we're most needed. Next slide, please. Planning and preparing for hurricane season is a year-long process at Florida Power and Light. When preparing for a storm, what many people don't know is that it begins well in advance of a hurricane making landfall, so that we're ready and able to respond as soon as it's safe to do so. So this year, we're going to be making a number of adjustments to that because we now have to mix our hurricane plan with our pandemic plan. We're going to incorporate social distancing whenever possible. We're going to provide sanitizing materials to crews. We're going to adjust the layout of our staging sites to a more micro setting. Some of you have been fortunate enough to see the small army that we call in when we usually stage them all together, but just to be safe, we're going to have micro staging sites. We're also going to administer screening for temperature checks of all of our crews, and we're going to minimize the movement of our crews in general. Whenever possible, we're going to have our employees working remotely. We'll make sure they have connectivity so that we can work safely and efficiently. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what our customers can do to prepare. One of our biggest concerns is the new Florida resident who hasn't been through a storm yet and they don't know what to expect. As we all know, it doesn't take a Category 5 hurricane to cause significant damage. And while we've weathered many storms together, We're entering uncharted territory. None of us have ever had to stare down a hurricane during a global pandemic, and let's hope we don't have to. But the best thing that our customers can do for themselves and for us is to take it seriously. Start preparing now and not later. The actions that you take in the next coming weeks before a hurricane forms will really make a meaningful difference. So the first step is develop an emergency plan, just to think of how you're going to react to the storm if there's a power outage that could affect your family and your business. So I'm going to start with a quick list of what you should consider for your business. After this webinar, I believe that the EDC will send around kind of a flyer that we have of what a business can do to prepare. On that flyer, you're going to find the suggestions to ensure you have your employees' contact information up to date, identify what you need to secure in your building and what important equipment you need to secure. If you're a business with large equipment, you might need to call help to secure that. It's good to just have a plan of who you would call, review your insurance coverage, which we'll hear about more later, photograph and record your place of business inside and out. Prepare a list of vendors to provide disaster recovery services. That's going to be something important that you can have with you if you decide to evacuate. You have those numbers right there on hand. And if you do have vegetation that are up in the lines near your business, please don't attempt to trim them yourself, or your home for that matter. Don't attempt to trim them yourself. You need to have a professional to do that. And we really encourage everyone to do that now before a storm, because like I said earlier, that is a big cause of the reason why we have power outages. So just some things for you to consider for your family. Identify if your home is in a mandatory evacuation zone. And where you might stay if you're forced to evacuate. Reach out to shelters, as we heard earlier from St. Lucie County. You know, the pandemic has changed the way that sheltering is likely going to take place. So make sure you reach out to them to know what they're doing so that you can best prepare for your family. If you have pets, make sure you know where they're going to stay if you're forced to evacuate. And if you have someone who either is in your home or outside of your home, a loved one who is either elderly or in needing of life-sustaining medical equipment that requires electricity, really think about what the plan is going to be. Do you have backup generators? If not, where are they going to go? We have a lot of great information online at fpl.com/storm. So it goes beyond checklists. It really talks about everyone's responsibility. So I encourage everyone to go there. Next slide, please. I also encourage everyone to download our app. So you can do that by texting the letters APP to MyFPL, which is 69375. I'm going to repeat that. Text the letters APP to 69375. This app is going to allow you to report power outages and down power lines during a storm. It allows you to safely do that from inside of your house. I think the only thing I can advise during a storm is please don't leave your house. There's so many dangers with down power lines, and it really puts you, your family at risk. It puts us at risk because we have to go out and help the situation. It puts your first responders at risk. Please just stay in your home. You can also text the word JOIN to 69375 to receive storm updates from Florida Power and Light. It's just, again, another tool to stay in contact when we are mixing our pandemic plan and our hurricane plan together. Next slide, please. So this is just, again, a slide that's going to talk about what modes of communication that we are going to reach out to our customers. We're going to use social media. We're going to use the public meetings that go through the county. I'll be the spokesperson, so I'll either be Zooming in, or if I have an issue with connectivity, I'll be there in person. So we're going to make sure that we get the information to our customers. If you are in ground zero and you don't have connectivity, we will send a crew out there to make sure that everyone is aware of the latest information. So it's important that we communicate with each other, and that's our commitment to all of our customers. Next slide, please. So after a storm passes, we'll start to assess the damage and begin our restoration efforts. We have a proven restoration process and how we get the lights back on, and it will not change. We don't restore power based on the customers, like when the customers report it or where they live or the status of the accounts. That's not how we restore power. Rather, we begin with a really multiple locations and follow this overall plan. So we try to get the power to the largest numbers of customers safely and quickly. From there, we then repair the infrastructure serving the smaller groups and neighborhoods and converging onto the hardest hit areas until every one of our customers' power is restored. Next slide, please. While we've been actively planning and preparing for the 2020 hurricane season, there's no doubt there are going to be some unforeseen challenges related to COVID-19. This pandemic is very real, and the consequences could be very significant. We take the potential impact of both hurricane and pandemic on our communities very seriously, and we encourage our customers to do the same. The extraordinary circumstances surrounding this pandemic may limit our ability to bring that outside resource, including utility crews from other states. Just to give an example, let's recall the restoration effort following Hurricane Irma. We had more than 28,000 people from 30 states and Canada helping us with that restoration effort. It hit 60% in the state of Florida. Given the current travel restrictions and guidelines from health officials, it's unlikely we're going to be able to amass that kind of restoration effort in that size. Also, we're gonna have many preventative measures we're gonna have to take to protect the health and safety of our workforce, including social distancing and screening. It's likely gonna reduce our productivity, resulting in longer restoration times. And this is something that we want to communicate to our customers so that we're open and honest. Be prepared for extended outages. We hope it doesn't happen. As I said earlier, we've done all of this hardening efforts and we have our plan, but we need our customers to be prepared for the reality that we are mixing two crises together if we get hit by a storm. We ask our customers for their patience as we work to restore their power safely and as quickly as possible. And rest assured, our commitment to our customers will not change. We will work around the clock until everyone's power is restored. Next slide, please. So thank you for your time today. Please know we remain 100% committed to being there for our customers when they need us the most.
And it is a crisis within a crisis. So as Kate's mentioning, it is the existing COVID crisis. So that's our next speaker. We're very blessed to have Cleveland Clinic in our community, and we're fortunate to have the Chief Operating Officer of Cleveland Clinic Martin Health, Chris Soska, here with us today. So Chris, please enlighten us.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk this afternoon. What I wanted to talk about today is what we've been doing to manage through the pandemic, really share lessons learned, and Kate and Frank have spoken a lot about that. And I'll talk about how we've been preparing for the hurricane season coming up and the expectations during. And as Kate and Frank said, and they probably said it 50 times each about planning. And I think when the pandemic first started, not one of us had really pulled out their plans for pandemic to how to manage through this. And so we were all learning in March and February on anticipations. We at Cleveland Clinic Martin Health developed our surge plans for this. This was during when all elective cases were shut down, and anticipated having to go to outside facilities to manage care for our patients and protect our caregivers. But as we began to reopen, those plans needed to get adjusted. And that was where we realized that this pandemic is not going to go away tomorrow. It's going to be here for a little while. And as we're here today talking about planning for the hurricane season, we needed to start building our plans that we put in place as part of normal operations. And so I just would suggest, and my advice is, if you have a hurricane plan, that plan doesn't change with the pandemic. It's making the adjustments for the pandemic in those plans. And for us, it's how do we continue to maintain opening up our ambulatory centers, our elective cases, and that is going to again continue to evolve over time. We continue to plan, as we like to put it, as our 3 S's: space, staff, and what we call stuff. This is all the PPE, and that's probably the biggest area that needs to be focused as we move into hurricane season. We've been able to staff up our supplies and build our inventories back up when things were a little bit slower. And But as we enter into hurricane season, we know that roads could be shut down, transport can slow. We need to prepare to make sure that we can have enough supplies on hand through the hurricane and post. And so those are, again, as we work through and manage through the pandemic, it is a day by day, and we are continuing to try to manage this as part of our normal operations and not as just a single event. And so as you're looking through your plans, your businesses, or as Frank indicated, your home, it's important that you look at, don't treat the hurricane any different season as you would in the past. It's important that you plan ahead and go through those things that have changed because of the pandemic, things that you would have relied on in the past or would have been there, to make sure that you know where to go, where to get those supplies, or who to call. As Frank and Kate described, things are going to maybe a little bit slower getting back up. So it's important to make sure that you're planning ahead. And just recognize that plans, as best plans are made, they will change as we continue to move through the pandemic and the hurricane season. So what Cleveland Clinic is doing to prepare for this, and it is uniquely different, as most of you know, when a hurricane approaches, we pull in 2 teams of clinical staff into our hospitals, and we, as the hurricane storm gets closer, and we start sustaining tropical storm winds, we will shut down and lock down the hospital to protect the hospital and the caregivers inside. We staff with 2 teams because we will be running multiple shifts. And in the past, this has not been a challenge for us, but now we need to be mindful of social distancing. And so during the hurricane, we are planning now to how we social distance our teams when they're sleeping from those that are working, and even though they're already in the hospital, to maintain our screening protocols, such as temp screenings before shifts, and having the ability to quarantine caregivers if they happen to become symptomatic, and how to manage that, again, because our hospital will be locked down and we'll need to be able to manage that, those teams. So more so planning in this, where we've done a lot of tabletop exercises at Martin Health, and we continue to review this, is the post-storm. So most hurricane seasons, prior to the hurricane, we are looking to try to discharge as many patients as we can, manage our elective cases, so that, again, we don't have full houses. In this year, in this situation, our hospitals are pretty full right now. And so we are planning that we will have, again, a full house. And so when we look at post-storm, and if we do get hit, we need to be prepared on how to manage that care for post-storm as well, besides those that are in the hospital. So a lot of the planning that we've done with the pandemic for surge planning and where we can identify additional beds, we've acquired emergency MASH tents that can hold up to 10 patients. And we've got 12 of those units that we can pop up in our parking lots in order to care for patients. And so all of that planning that we were doing for that pandemic will come in to play as we look at post-hurricane season. So we continue to run these exercises so that we do not leave any stone unturned. And it's important that though we do not want to think the worst, we will plan for the worst and hope for the best. We are managing our staff and continue to staff up with external staffing and making sure that we are adequately prepared to care for the patients today and through the hurricane season. Expectations during the hurricane, again, as I mentioned, the hospital will go down on lockdown as it has in the past. In those rare occasions where we do need emergency assistance, where somebody does need to get in, we rely on our fire and rescue and EMS to coordinate that care. if we do need to get somebody in. And continue to have our phone lines open. If you go to the next screen, these two websites, again, most of you are probably familiar with the coronavirus COVID-19 updates. We continue to keep this updated as we manage through this pandemic. But also in the past, we've placed information on Martin Health regarding our news releases. This is a good place to go to manage our hours of operation, when we're opening, when we're closing, and what's open during that time, and direct patients appropriately if needed. So, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate you being here. Appreciate all your caregivers too. Please pass along our sincere appreciation for everything they've been doing for everyone over the last few months. So with that, planning. Now is the time to be planning your insurance. It is not 2 weeks before a hurricane. It's not when a hurricane is imminent. That's probably something, I'm probably stealing her words, but
no, that's okay, Bill.
Kathy Post, the president with Post Insurance.
Thank you very much. And it is a pleasure to be here and share with you a little bit about the insurance planning phases of both hurricanes, but really your insurance planning and time should be an ongoing checklist of items. Don't wait until hurricane season, or certainly not until the storm is imminent, before you start planning for reviewing your insurance policies, whether you're a business owner or homeowner. This is the kind of thing that you really should be doing on an annual basis, but we will talk specifically about hurricane preparedness. Go ahead and go to the first slide.
Kathy, I'm going to jump in for a quick second.
Yes.
There is some static or something in your line. It might be a loose mic or something. You can check your connections, and I'm going to jump out. Please go ahead, but just wanted you to know that.
Okay, is that any better? Okay, so as I mentioned, reviewing your policies on an annual basis is really important. It's a good time to think about, from a business perspective, what types of changes have you impacted or implemented over the last 12 months? Have you added new equipment? Have you expanded or reduced your inventory? What kind of differences or ways are you operating your business today than you may have been doing just even 6 months ago? And have you taken the time to reach out to your agent to review your policies and the changes, particularly since many of us are working remotely, or perhaps you don't have as much staffing? So it's a really good time to reach out to your agent and talk with them about the different policies that you have, what types of coverages that you have, what might be covered or what might be excluded, particularly, as a result of a hurricane or any other type of wind event. We think of hurricanes as a type of event, but it's really windstorm. So we look at things, from a windstorm perspective, because just because we're in hurricane season, we may not be hit with a actual named hurricane. It could be a tropical storm. So really evaluating your policy and understanding how your policy will respond in those types of events. Pays particular attention to whether or not you have business interruption coverage. Business interruption will pay your expenses and your loss of income should you have damage as a result of a hurricane. So many times we see that this is an area where policyholders are significantly underinsured, or they don't have the coverage at all. So you really want to ask that question. Is it covered? How much would I be entitled to on a monthly basis? And then how long would that pay for? Would it pay for 2 months or 3 months, 6 months, 12 months worth of my loss of income? Should I have a major event and be completely devastated and not be able to open my business, or may have to open my business at a reduced level of income? So these are some really great questions for you to evaluate with your agent, and taking mind of all types of things, not just hurricanes, but theft or fire. Fire can be the most devastating thing to a business. So you really want to look at all different types of risks that your business might be susceptible to. Then we can move on to, keeping your property well maintained to reduce risk of loss. Again, this is year round, not just at hurricane season, but as Kate mentioned, you might want to walk around your business or your home. And if you have trees touching, get those taken care of. Remove any debris that might be laying around that could be flying through the air and cause injury or risk. If you have a generator that's going to support your business, make sure you test your generator on a monthly basis, particularly as you move into June and July. If you wait until the storm is getting close, then generating companies that maintain those will be too busy and won't be necessarily have the time to be able to come out and test or service your generator. So you definitely want to test and service your generator on an annual basis, but particularly in the June and July months. In addition to that, check and see if many of us are working remotely. I know my office, most of my staff is working from their homes. So you want to double check with your agent if your equipment, my business equipment, is covered while it is located in other places. Is my computer systems that I have, moved to the homes of my staff, is that going to be covered if it's damaged by a storm while it's someplace else? So this is another thing that we don't normally think about, but because of COVID-19, now we're having to ask those questions that are a little outside the box. So, is my business equipment covered someplace else if it's located there during the storm? And then, of course, we want people to take video and photo inventories of their businesses, their business equipment, their inventory, and your home contents, your home as well. Anything that you can to document what you own before a storm is very, very helpful when it's time to evaluate a claim. Particularly if we have major devastation, such as a tornado or your whole business is just completely demolished. It's very difficult for people to remember everything they had inside of their businesses. It's very difficult to remember everything you had in your home. So having that video log or photo log will really, really help. Store it someplace besides on your phone. I encourage people to put it on an SD card or store it in the cloud or someplace where then you can send it away to somebody outside of the state, so that if you need to get your hands on, you can. Storing it on your phone may not be the best option, obviously, if you can't get to it or your battery runs dead or whatever. So take those videos and record. Have good documentation. If you've purchased items that are of high value, try to have a copy of the invoices, or the invoices are not stored on your business site as well. Again, just so you can have that information readily available for an adjuster if you need it. Okay, next slide, please. I just wanted to mention a little bit more about flood insurance, because most homeowner policies and commercial policies do not cover damage due to flooding. Flooding is rising water or tidal action. This photo is compliments of T.C. Palm that was a result in Fort Pierce, actually just a couple of years ago. And I put these numbers up here just so people would be aware that, we always think about wind events and the devastation that comes from wind events. But if we have major flooding, particularly after we've had weeks and weeks of a lot of rain, then it can be significant damage caused by that water. And just as recent as Hurricane Michael and Hurricane Irma, flood damage was averaged up around the $50,000 mark. So please take a look at flood insurance. Even if you're not in what we call a high-risk flood zone, it does not mean that you will not flood. There's nothing that says that if you're here or there is going to determine whether you're going to flood. So, I would really encourage, particularly business owners, because often it's overlooked and flooding can be devastating to your business. So take a look at flood insurance. Next slide, please. So continuing on with the before the storm hits of things to do, you want to make sure that you have a list of all of your insurance companies. It might seem obvious, but you may have 4 or 5 different insurance policies that are protecting things like your business property, your business autos. You may have a separate policy that covers your equipment. So you want to make sure you have a complete list of all the company names, have the phone number for the insurance company, and also have the phone number for their claim number, so that you'll be able to easily and quickly report the claim. The other thing to ask your agent is, what is the best way for me to report a claim? Does the insurance company have an app? That might be the best way to report a claim. Most of the time, reporting the claim to your agent is not the best or most efficient way to report the claim. Remember, if you're dealing with local agents, then I may have damage, I may not have internet or phones, so it may be more difficult to get in touch with me as opposed to my insurance company, who has separate claim sites set up beyond Florida so that they can easily and quickly respond to claims. Download the carrier apps, bookmark their websites, anything like that. Have your policy number handy. That's going to be the easiest way for them to identify and set your claim up. Having all that information ahead of time, keeping it handy, keeping it in a plastic bag. People laugh when I say, make sure you got your Ziploc bag of essential documents, and that's obviously to keep them dry should we have major rain or major flooding. As I mentioned, go ahead and complete your maintenance projects. Make sure that you've got your shutters, assess your supplies, test your shutters. I know it's always really cumbersome when we got to put our shutters up and the wind is blowing. So you want to do that well in advance to make sure that everything is working optimally. Something else I just want to mention, that the most people who have lived in Florida the last few years understand that we have hurricane deductibles. And when you're identifying with your agent what your coverages entail, you want to talk about your hurricane deductible. The National Hurricane Center will issue warnings and watches. And when that happens in Florida, then your hurricane deductible gets activated. And basically what that means is you're going to have a different deductible than what you normally would have for, say, a theft or a fire. So knowing what that number is, generally it's about 3% of what your covered property value is. So whether that's your structure, your building, if you own the building, or if you own your home, or if you have contents and business property. So you're going to want to know what that hurricane deductible is. For one, it will just help you understand what your out-of-pocket risk is going to be and help you be more prepared for that. Hurricane deductibles can be substantial, and so if you know that going in, then financially you can be prepared for that. In addition, it will also help you to know what the insurance company may or may not be obligated to help you pay for. So if you have a high hurricane deductible and you have low damage, then it's important that you still report the claim, but you'll at least know, what and if the insurance company will be paying. And then just as a side, business policies sometimes have wind deductibles as opposed to hurricane deductibles. And not to make this too terribly complicated, but there is a difference. So you'll want to ask your agent, do I have a wind deductible? Do I have a hurricane deductible? And when are those implemented? And how much is my out-of-pocket going to be? Because there is a difference, and it will make a difference on what the amount that you have to pay out of pocket. Go ahead, next slide, please. So of course, COVID-19 is definitely going to impact hurricane season, as the other presenters has mentioned. It's also going to impact how insurance companies will be taking care of our clients post-storm. So there's a couple of things that you can do to help that process in the preparedness state. Is make sure you have all of your emergency supplies and repair items on hand. We encourage people to make temporary repairs afterwards. Well, because the supply chain might get disrupted, or because it might take longer to get additional supplies into the area because of COVID-19, and because contractors might be more restricted, you want to think ahead of time. What might I need? What additional items am I going to need? Tarps, plywood, duct tape, whatever it might be. Go ahead and stock up those in advance, because afterwards it might be much more difficult to get those items than what we have seen in the past. Insurance companies will also be using drones and satellite imagery to help assess damages, and we saw that through Hurricane Michael, and I think we're going to see that more if we should see devastating storms this year, and that's going to help them to be able to assess claims quicker. And as I mentioned before, using carrier insurance company apps to be able to file and upload photos, if that is a possibility, making sure that they have your email address on file, make sure they have your cell phone numbers. All of this can be submitted through your agent, but that will help faster response time. In addition, many insurance companies will be sending out automated messages, both pre-storm and post-storm. So they will be able to tell if you were in an area that was impacted by the storm. And if that's the case, then they will be able to communicate through automated text messaging and email if they have that contact information for you. Next slide, please. So after the storm hits, we do want you to take photographs and assess your damages. We want you to be very careful before making any temporary repairs. Make sure that it's safe to do so. Make sure that there's no down power lines. Make sure that FP&L has done what they need to do first. But once it is safe, we do want you to make temporary repairs. If you, for your businesses, you need to do whatever you can to be able to get back to business as fast as possible, obviously, but we want you to do that in a safe way. So temporarily make your repairs, keep your receipts, and document any repairs that you do. Make sure that you, I'm sorry, I got off track there for a second. Make sure you only do repairs that are temporary. We don't want anyone doing any permanent repairs until you hear from your adjuster. They will be out to take a look at everything, but we don't want any additional any additional losses to happen, any further damage to happen. So as an example, if you have a window that's blown out, go ahead and tarp it up or plywood it up so that you don't have more rain coming in should we have additional storms or issues that happen after the fact. One of the things that I just want to mention that I did leave off, and I think it's important for business owners to remember, is as you're packing up your business before the storm, think about things that are sitting on the ground. Think about your equipment that is near windows and doors, and pull anything up off the floor, particularly computer hard drives, anything like that. We want to, pull that into an interior room, cover it with plastic bags, take things off the wall or lightweight items on desks that could, cause damage by projectiling throughout your offices. We want to do anything in your businesses that will prevent major devastation should you just have a minor thing like a window blowout. In addition, make sure you unplug your computers and your phones. If there's a power surge, you don't want damage from that. And so if you just simply unplug those items and protect as much of your business property as you can. Put towels in front of doors or around windows that might be prone to water being blown in through the wind. We call that wind-driven rain. Anything that you can do to protect that type of damage is also very, very helpful. The last thing I just want to mention is be patient. I think through the post-storm and in the middle of a pandemic at the same time, we're all going to have to be more patient than ever. As Kate mentioned with FP&L, many of the claims adjusters in the past come from out of state. So because of the travel restrictions, we too may have reduced number of adjusters in the field. Some adjusters may be handling claims just via phone and internet, email. So we want to make sure that everybody is particularly patient. Insurance companies handle claims on a triage basis. So we take care of the people, not who call first, but the people who have the most damage. If people are displaced out of their homes, they will be handled first. And then businesses will also be handled as a priority. And adjusters handle business claims differently. There's different adjusters that handle business claims from those that handle homeowner claims. So it's a totally different division within the insurance company. But again, they will handle the people with the worst damage first. So for people to have patience, I think is going to be critical in this storm season with dealing with the global pandemic at the same time. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Kathy. Thank you all. It's a lot of wonderful information, or good, useful information. Maybe we can pry a little bit more information out of you now. So this is intended to be a dialogue. So we do have the chat room is available. We do have counselors as well, in addition to the presenters here, Sometimes our small business development counselors or our business navigators, our municipal business navigators can solve other issues for you right here in the chat room. So if you do have a question, please post it. Frank, the Emergency Operations Center is currently active in some state now. What's the current status of the EOC, and when do you actually activate? What are the levels? How does that work?
Awesome. That's a great question. Right now we're at a level 2 activation, which is a partial activation. So we don't bring in all of our essential personnel. So we manage everything remotely as well. So we have been activated since March 18th due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So typically what happens in a normal hurricane season, if there's anything such like that anymore, I don't think anything is normal anymore, but in a normal hurricane season, we start to get those reports 7 to 10 days out. And as the storm approaches, and if the models show that St. Lucie County is going to get activated, about 5 days out, we'll activate to a level 2 activation in our EOC. So we bring in minimal staff to start managing and preparing for the storm. As the storm gets closer and that the cone of uncertainty gets a little bit narrower, and now we determine that St. Lucie County is going to be impacted to some extent, then we will go to a level 1 activation. That's when we bring in all our ESFs, fire department, police department, the sheriff's department, transportation, our hospitals, our utility partners as well. And then we start putting our plan in place.
And that's more virtually this year is the plan?
That will be virtually this year. We have about a third of what we would normally have in our EOC this year.
Okay,
and that's just to keep, I'm
Good.
sorry.
No,
That's
go
just
ahead,
to keep social distancing, and keep people as safe as possibly as we can and still respond to the need at hand.
Perfect. So I'm not seeing any chat dialogues pop up yet, but the presenters can hear each other. I know you guys get to speak sometimes, but you don't get to speak. This would be a good opportunity if you guys had any questions for each other as well, or comments. So with that, unless we see any chat questions pop up here, we are going to very shortly, we're going to go down a little bit further here, but I think we're about to wrap up our webinar. So again, thank you all very much, presenters. Super appreciate you. Kate, Chris, Kathy, Frank, thank you all very much. I do see one, this is how it happens. When I threaten to hang up, people start, the chat box fills up. So I'm gonna start threatening to hang up earlier. Anyway, so I do think we have a question. Maybe it's just a thank you out there. Excellent. Yeah, Linda Fitzpatrick saying thank you to everyone. Obviously, we had a bunch of great information, useful information. So again, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
There's a question, Bill.
Oh, okay. Who can you read that to us, Brian? Or?
Yeah, so how will facilities and systems respond to a hurricane with already reduced and overextended staff is part one. Are there evacuation plans for those diagnosed with COVID-19 for high-risk populations that have a greater chance for a COVID-19 illness? And what resources and capabilities are currently being heavily utilized during COVID-19 treatment and response efforts, but may be threatened due to potential storm trajectories?
Okay. So could you guys hear those questions?
Yes, I could take the first one. I think we all have pretty much said that we have, most of our staff is working remotely, and while we may have reduced staff in our facilities, does not mean that we will see any less of a response from the Public Safety Department and how we respond to any event this year.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Kate. My
Okay.
unmute. Oh, can you hear me? All right. Just to echo that, I mean, Florida Power and Light, we have an entire hurricane plan that we've now mixed with our pandemic plan. So we will be able to respond effectively and safely, I think is the key there. So it might just delay it slightly because we have to take those extra precautions on being safe. As far as plans for those who are diagnosed with COVID, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a checkpoint and take temperature checks for every one of the crew members that come through. If they have an elevated temperature, they will be removed from the rest of the group and actually housed in a location, it's a tent, where we'll do further testing on them. And if it's found that they have COVID, then obviously they'll seek medical attention. We're actually going to have a nursing station at our sites that we set up just in case we do have anyone who does come down with COVID, so we can safely protect them as well, because safety is our number one thing for Florida Power and Light. So hope I helped answer that question.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. Chris, I think the last question is really very much for you. That's pretty good. We got a question for almost every presenter here, and that is about evacuating the casualties or evacuating those diagnosed with COVID pre-storm.
Yeah, we're going to, and again, those that are hospitalized, we're going to continue to manage their care during the storm here. Again, obviously during the storm, it's going to be difficult to try to bring people in. Regarding the staff, as I mentioned earlier, we're now preparing to make sure that we're staffed up appropriately for them. We continue to do all of our precautionary measures when caregivers come into the hospital. They are temp screened, they are washing their hands, everybody's masked here at the facility. We continue to reinforce, even to our visitors, which we've opened here to the hospitals, we continue to reinforce the same precautions. I think when it comes to the heavily utilized, and Kate, I'm going to lean on you here, is that power. With the COVID event and the need to continue to maintain our ICUs and the vents, and that, we will have more patients in the hospital. Maintaining that power, which Kate and FPL have done a great job with ensuring that we stay sustained with that power. PPE is always going to be a continued challenge because if we have to, even for our first responders, that have to go out, they're going to need that equipment, that supplies. So I think it will put a little bit more strain. But I think this little downturn that we had prior to this recent uptick of COVID, I think it allowed a lot of us to regroup on our supplies and get prepared for this. And Frank, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I will tell you that it's been an impressive, and I think it's important for the panel, for everybody on the phone to know this, that the fire and rescue, law enforcement, DOH, emergency management, hospitals, it has been such a collaborative effort to manage this pandemic. This is, and I see no concerns coming into the hurricane season, knowing the groups that are around us to take care of what we need to take care of. We manage just what's right in front of us, and I think that's what's been successful.
Yeah, Chris, you hit the nail on the head. That little downturn or downtick in COVID allowed a lot of the supply chains and conversely a lot of agencies to restock up on supplies. That doesn't mean that there'll still be a strain on that system. The recent uptick has certainly starting to test that supply chain as well, but we are better situated than we once were. The only other thing that I would add to the second portion of that question, when it comes to our general population shelters and our special needs shelters, we do have plans for a shelter inside a shelter should one of the shelterees develop illness. We have plans to go ahead and take them out of that population and isolate them even within our shelters. If that question comes up, it sort of had that question had that flavor, if you will. So we are prepared and for any contingency that may happen.
Perfect, thank you. And we are approaching the top of the hour. We do have one more question in the chat room here. So post-storm, Cleveland Clinic, Chris, that's clearly for you. Is there a virtual triage for the ER? What are the plans for triage the ER?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that we've actually been very successful in, and that's going to virtual visits and triaging calls. So our nurse triage lines will continue to remain open even during the storm. So patients and residents could call in at least to get their symptoms triaged to see where they're at, and we can manage that way. But virtual telemedicine, virtual triaging will stay online during the event. And actually, before this event, we were probably managing 2% of our visits. And during the beginning of COVID, we were running about 80% of our visits were virtual. We're now, we're probably around 40% as we've opened up face-to-face, but virtual visits will remain open. And that will allow us to triage before having to come to the ER.
Really good news. Not good news, but good to know. Yeah, a lot of useful information. So again, thank you all to all of our presenters. Thank you to everyone who attended today. There is more useful information at youredc.com, youredc.com/VBRC. This will be posted up over the weekend, and thank you all for attending, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.